So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over the GCSE Maths past paper of June 2024 on the foundation tier, paper 3, which is a calculator paper. Now before we get started working through this paper, a little reminder that I'll include a question breakdown in the description, so if you get stuck on a particular question you can see what topic it relates to and then maybe go back and revise and review that particular topic. And I'll also include a link to the 162 Maths contents page, which gives you easy access to video lessons which cover all the topics in greater detail, along with topic tests, audits and other exam paper walkthroughs. So let's get started on question 1. So question 1 says a village has 4 bus stops. The bar chart shows information about people at the bus stop at 3 p.m. one day. And for question 1A it says 2 people were at the football ground bus stop, showed its information on the bar chart. So for this, what we need to do is, using a ruler, which I'm not going to do, is to draw a bar with a thickness of 5 little squares, and again making sure that you're using the ruler, going all the way up to 2 and making sure you've got equal space between the post office. Then should you wish to, you can shade it in. So you should have something that looks like that. Moving on to question 2, it says how many more people were at the school bus stop than the post office bus stop. So at the school bus stop there was 13 people, and at the post office there is 4. So for this question, all we need to do is just do 13 take away 4, which gives us an answer of 9. Then moving on to question 2, it says here are 4 temperatures in degrees Celsius. Write down the temperatures in order, starting at the coldest. So for this, what we need to do is just order these numbers in ascending order. So we've got the smallest first, so we should have -7, -5, -1 and 3. Then for question 3, it says here are the first 3 terms of a linear sequence. Write down the next term. Now in a linear sequence, the sequence is increasing or decreasing by the same number. So here we should be able to see that the sequence is going up in 6. So to find the next sequence, we just need to do 17 plus 6, which gives us an answer of 23. It then says describe the term-to-term rule for 1 mark, and the term-to-term rule is add 6. And if you did write starting with, what number did we start with? Starting with 5, then that would be absolutely fine. That would be describing the sequence, but the term-to-term sequence is how do you get from one term to the next? We just simply add 6. Moving on to question 4, it says Lucas spends 71 pence. He spends the exact amount with 4 coins. List the 4 coins that he uses. Now you can write this in any particular order, but the coins are going to be 50p, 10p, another 10p and 1p. It then says complete each statement using one of the following symbols. So here we've got our inequalities and equal sign. Now in terms of the inequalities, you either remember that the crocodile eats the bigger number or that the arrow points in the smaller direction. So for this we should have the arrow pointing towards 2.508. 0.25 is the same as a quarter, and 2 is less than 5 over 2. Moving on to question 6, it says here are 3 solids in which we've got a cube, a square base pyramid and a cone. Now the question for 6a says how many faces does the cube have? So how many sides does the cube have? And that's going to be 6. It then says how many edges does the square base pyramid have? Well, that's going to be the straight lines. So if you count up the straight lines in the square base pyramid, including the sides that you can't see, you should find that we've got 8. And for the last part, it says how many vertices does a cone have? Vertices is basically a corner or a point, in which the answer should just be 1. Moving on to question 7, it says here is a number machine, complete the number machine. So starting with 12, if we take away 4, multiply by 5. Now you can do this straight on your calculator, in which you should have the answer of 40. Moving on to question 7b, it says here is a different number machine, complete the number machine. So we need to find out what this missing number here is. Now if we work backwards, we're starting with 9. Now if we do the opposite of dividing by 2, which is 18, so what I'm needing to do is to get from 7 to 18 using one operator. So for this, the only way of getting from 7 to 18 is going to be to add 11. It then says for part C, here is a different number machine when x equals 5, y equals 13, x equals 10, y equals 28. Complete the number machine. So the two missing things we need to write here are going to be, so now how we actually do this is the fact that when we're multiplying, what we want is to end up with a bigger number than what we've got for y, because we're going to be subtracting after. So here, if I was to do 5 times, let's say 2, I'd get 10, and unless I'm subtracting a negative number, there's no way I can get from 10 to 13 and 20 to 28. And again, we've got to make sure that we're using the operators that we can see in the two boxes. So the correct answer you should have and complete is going to be multiplying by 3 and taking away 2. Moving on to question 8, it says that a pack of pegs costs 40 pence and a bar of soap costs £2.20, a basket costs £7. Dan buys 2 packs of pegs, 1 bar of soap and 1 basket. What fraction of the total cost is the cost of the basket? So for this, what we need to do first is we need to work out what the total cost is going to be. So following this sort of order, what we should have is we've got 2 lots of 40 pence. I'm going to work in pounds, so I'm going to write 0.4. You can write 0.40 if you wish, plus 1 times £2.20 plus 7. Now if I type that all into my calculator, I should get an answer of £10. And then from that, what I then want to do is work out the fraction of the total cost is the basket. So the cost of a basket is £7, so it's going to be £7 over £10, which as a fraction is 7 over 10. Moving on to question 9, it says calculate the square root of 625 plus 7 cubed. So for this, all you need to do is just type this into your calculator. The square root of 625 is 25 and 7 cubed is 343. And typing that calculation into your calculator should give you a final answer of 368. Moving on to question 10, it says 8,400 fans go to a rugby match, 6,850 of the fans support the home team and the remaining fans support the away team. 20% of the home fans wear a scarf and 2,319 of all fans wear a scarf. Complete the frequency tree. So first things first, let's just zoom out so I can see all the tree in its entirety. Now the first one that we want to be able to fill in is this box here. So for this, we know that this plus this box needs to add up to 8,400. So if I do 8,400 minus 6850, I get an answer of 1550. Then the next one, in terms of the information that's given to me, is the fact that 20% of the home fans wear a scarf. Now to work out 20% of 6,850, I do 6850 multiplied by 0.2. Alternately, you could just work out 10%, double that, and then subtract it, in which you should have the answer of 1,370. Now from that, we can then work out what this one is by subtracting. So 6850 minus 1370 gives us an answer of 5480. Then going back to the last bit of information, it then tells us that 2,319 people wear a scarf. So if the home fans is 1,370, then all I need to do for this one is 2,319 minus 1370, and that gives me an answer of 949. And then finally, for the last little oval, I do 1550 minus 949, because these two need to add up to 1,550, and that gives me an answer of 601. Moving into question 11, it says work out the coordinate of B. Now for B, looking at the coordinate of A, we've got -2, so this point here it's -2 and the height is at 5, and for C, this point here must be 4 and this coordinate here is -1. So using these two coordinates here, I could then write down what the coordinate of B is. So B is going to be at -2 minus 1. It then says for point C is reflected on the line x equals 6 to point D, write down the coordinates of D. So what I'm wanting to do is to reflect this point here on the mirror line. So as you can see, it is 2 squares perpendicular to that mirror line. So I just go 2 squares here. So this is where point D is going to be. Now if that's 4, this is going to be 5, that's going to be 6, that's going to be 7, that's going to be 8. And going across, we've got minus 1. So the coordinate for D is going to be at 8 minus 1. Moving on to question 12, it says Liz records distance of some runs and the times of each run takes. The scatter diagram shows information in the table. Now for question 12a, it says complete the graph by adding the missing label and plotting the 2 missing points. So this horizontal axis represents the distance and the units are in kilometers, and then all that's left for me to do is then plot the 2 coordinates, which is at 838, and 838 is going to be there, and the last coordinate, which is 8.5 and 42. So 8.5 is there, 42 is going to be there. Then for question 12b, it says describe the correlation shown in the scatter diagram. Well, this type of correlation is going to be positive, and if I was to draw a line of best fit, just get rid of there. If I was to draw a line of best fit, the points would be virtually very, very close to the line, if not on it, and so I would go as far as saying that the strength is strong, just like the force. Moving on to question 13, it says AB is a straight line, is y half of x? Now for this, what we need to do is work out what x and y is. Now for y to be on a straight line, angles on a straight line need to add up to 180, so if I do 180 minus 127, I get an answer of y equals, and that's going to give me an answer of 53. Angles around a point add up to 360, so 360 minus 90 minus 163 gives me an x value of 107. So as 2 times 53 does not equal 107, actually equals 106, the answer would be no, and this is my supporting answer, along with working out what x and y are. Moving on to question 14, let's just zoom in so we can see a little bit clearer on the screen. It says multiply out the brackets. So for here, if we do 3 times 2x, remember when you're multiplying, we multiply numbers with numbers, letters with letters, so 3 lots of 2x is going to give me 6x, and 3 multiplied by 8 gives me 24. Moving on to question 15, it says complete these statements. So what plus 5x gives you 9x? Well, that's going to be 4x. What times y gives you y squared? That's going to be y. And what subtracted from 2t gives you t? So if we do the opposite and we add 2t, t plus 2t gives me 3t. Moving on to question 15, it says tins of beans sold in shop A and shop B. Shop A, 1 tin is 64 pence and buy 4 tins for the price of 3. And shop B, 1 tin is 62 pence, packs of 3 tins is £1.70, and there's a 10% reduction on in the price of all the packs. At which shop is it cheaper to buy 20 tins? And we also need to state how much cheaper it is. So for shop A first, and this is for 5 marks. So for shop A, if we look at 20 tins, so if I just imagine these are tins, in which I'm going to buy them in packs of 4. Now for every 4 I buy, one of them is going to be free. So therefore, all I'm doing is I'm paying for 15 tins. So 15 tins equals 15 times 0.64, and that comes up to that comes up to a cost of £9.60. Now for shop B, let's just use a different colour pen. So for here, for shop B, I can buy packs of 3 for £1.70. So I'm going to need and I could buy individual tins for 62 pence. So I'm going to need to buy 6 packs, which equals 18 tins, and then I need to buy another 2 tins. Now for this, what we then need to, I've just realised I've gone off the screen, so let me just correct that. Now for shop B, as I said, I'm going to need 6 packs of 3, which equals 18 tins, and I'm going to need 2 tins on top of that. Now if I deal with the 6 packs of 3 tins, then that's going to be, so 6 packs equals 6 times £1.70, which comes up to a cost of £10.20. Now with this I get a 10% reduction, so 10% is going to be £1.02 taken off, which gives me a total cost of those 6 packs as £9.18. Now what I then need to do is add the 2 tins, so that's going to be 2 times 62 pence rather, so that comes up to £1.24. If I add those two amounts together, I get an answer of £10.42. So which shop is cheaper? Well, it's going to be shop A by £10.42 minus £9.60, which gives me a cost of, a difference I should say, or a saving of 82 pence. So either you can write it as £0.82 or 82p. And there is my answer for that one. Then moving on to question 17, it says there are 30 students in a class, 12 of the students have school lunch. Work out the ratio of students having school lunch to those not having school lunch. Give your answer in its simplest form. So the number of students having school lunch is 12, and if there are 30 students altogether, then that means that 18 students are not having lunch. So this is the ratio that I then need to simplify. So what goes into both 12 and 18? It's going to be 6. And 6 goes into 12 2 times and goes into 18 3 times. So my final answer is going to be 2 to 3. It then says in a different class, students wearing glasses to students not wearing glasses in the ratio of 3 to 8. What fraction of the students in the class wear glasses? So here, out of this, we've got 3 parts out of a total of 11 parts. Remember, when you're writing fractions, it's how many you've got over the grand total. For part 17c, it says the ratio 4 to 9 is written in the form of 1 to n. Work out the value of n. So here I've got 4 to 9 and I want 1 to n. So to get from this number to this number, I divide by 4. So what I need to do to find out what n is do 9 divided by 4, which gives me an answer of 2.25. Moving on to question 18, it says, here are the first 3 patterns of a sequence made up of small squares. On the grid, draw pattern 4. Now for this, you are going to need to use a ruler and draw this neatly using the squares provided. So what your diagram should look like is something like this. And now you can draw your pattern exactly where it should be. Now mine's just slightly off the actual grid, but this should be 4 by 4 and then a single square on each of the vertices. Moving on to question 18, it says that the expression for the number of small squares in the pattern in n is n squared plus 4. Now it says work out the least value of n for which the number of small squares is greater than 500. Now for this, what we're trying to work out is this, where it's greater than 500 but having the smallest number of n. Now if I go on and solve this, what I end up with is n squared equals 496, and then if I square root 496, I get an answer of 22.2710. Now when n is 22, I get 22 squared plus 4, which is going to give me an answer, if I just type that quickly into my calculator, 22 squared plus 4 of 488. And if I do 23 squared plus 4, I get an answer of 533. So the smallest value of n is going to be 23. Moving on to question 19, it says use Pythagoras' theorem to work out the value of x. Give your answer as a decimal. So using Pythagoras, the first thing you want to do is label your triangle correctly, where x is going to be c in this case. So here I've got 24 squared plus 31 squared equals x squared. Type this all into your calculator, in which you should get 1537 equals x squared. So x is going to equal the square root of 1537. Now if you type that into your calculator and they're not wanting your answer left as a square root, you should end up with an answer of 39.20459157. Now it doesn't say what they want the decimal rounded up to, so you could either leave your answer and copy the number that's on your calculator, or you can round it up. I'm going to round it up to 39.2, and that's to 1 decimal place, and that's in centimeters. Moving on to question 20. Just a little note that if you are going to round this question up, make sure you state what you've rounded it up to. For question 20, it says Rick claims most of the flats of his 8-4 building are energy efficient. He samples 45 flats from floors 1 to 5. Give a reason why his sample may not be useful in testing Rick's claim. Now there are lots of different answers you can give for this one, so it's worth checking on the mark scheme to see whether your 1 mark answer is going to be accepted. But you want something along the lines of that not all the flats may be the same. So in other words, if you've got a 4-bedroom flat, that might be different to in terms of energy efficient to, let's say, a 1-bedroom flat. You could also say that not all flats will have the same number of residents. You could also say something along the lines of that some flats may have not so great energy efficient appliances. It would be a good answer. Don't give a range, always just give one, because if you give a range and you're technically giving 2 answers, and there is a reason then for them not to give you that 1 mark. So just be confident in the answer that you give, but there are lots of acceptable answers. So if I've not mentioned the one that you've done, just check with the mark scheme to see if it would be accepted. For question 21, it says that here we've got an identity and we just need to check whether this is true. Now with identities, basically what it is one side is written one way algebraically and the right hand side is written another way algebraically, but for all values of whatever letter is being used, it should be true. So the box that you want to tick is the top one. Moving on to question 22, which we've got another 5 mark question. It says K hires a digger. The cost per day is £24.50 for the first 5 days, reduced by 20% for day 6, and it's the same rate for day 6 for day 7 onwards. The total cost is £259.70. For how many days did K hire the digger? So for this, what we need to do first, now if I did 5 times £24.50 and I type that into my calculator, I get an answer of £122.50. Now I know that obviously what we then have equated that she's hired the digger for more than 5 days. So for this, if I subtract £259.70 minus £122.50, then the change is going to be, let's just work that out, 295.7 minus 122.5. I get an answer of £137.20. Now the day 6 plus rate is 20% less than £24.50. So it's going to be £24.50 minus, now 10%, so 20% of £24.50 is going to be 2 lots of £2.45, which is £4.90. So that's how much discount they're getting. So if I do £24.50 minus £4.90, I get a rate of £19.60. Now what I want to work out now is how many £19.60s go into £137.20. So if I do 137.20 divided by £19.60, that gives me an answer of, let's just type that in, 137.60 minus divided by £19.60. That gives me a answer of let me just type it in because I've typed it incorrectly. 0.2 minus £19.60 gives me an answer of 7 days. So if I then add the 7 days to the 5 days, the total number of days is going to be 7 plus 5, which gives me a final answer of 12 days. Next, moving on to question 23, it says the front elevation of a cuboid is shown on this centimetre grid. And what the question is asking me, it's telling me that the volume of the cuboid is 42. Draw the side elevation on this centimetre grid. Now looking at this, to work out the volume, it's the length times the width times the height. Now the height of this particular cuboid is going to be 2, the width is 3, 2 times 3 is 6, so I've got 42 equals L times 6, so L has got to be 7. So the rectangle I then need to draw has got to have a height of 2 and a length of 7. So if I do this, and make sure you're using a ruler for this, and let me just make sure this is done. Obviously it's going to be a lot easier for you, in which what you should have is something that looks like this, where you've got a height of 2 and a length of 7. Now moving on to question 24a, it says on Monday Lars swims 50 metres in 40 seconds at a constant speed. On Tuesday Lars swims 1.5 kilometres. Assume he swims at a constant speed as on Monday. How many minutes does he swim for on Tuesday? Now there's a couple of ways in which you can work this question out. So the first thing, one way that some students may be directed to look at, is to first of all work out what that constant speed actually is. So speed is equal to distance divided by time, and looking at the units, we've got 50 meters divided by 40 seconds, and if I type that into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer of 1.25. So what that basically means is he's swimming at 1.25 meters per second. Now from this, what we can then do is work out how long is he swimming for. So we know the speed, we need to know the time. So time is equal to distance divided by time, distance divided by speed rather. Now for this, what we need to do, because the units are in meters in our speed, we need to convert this distance into meters only. So at the moment we've got it in kilometers, so there are 1,500 meters in 1 kilometer. 1.5 kilometers. So here it's going to be 1500 divided by 1.25, and if I type that into my calculator, I get an answer of 1,200 seconds. Now what I'm needing to do is I need to convert that into minutes. So how many seconds are there in a minute? Well, there's 60, so if I divide that by 60, I'm going to get an answer of 20 minutes. Now, alternately, another method you could do is to, let's try and use a different colour for this, is to first of all find out how many 50 metres there are in 1.5 kilometres. So if I did 1500 divided by 50, that gives me an answer of 30. Now to get the number of seconds, I multiply that by 40, which as you can see, not on the screen, so let me just shift that up. So if I then do 30 multiplied by 40, I get 1200 seconds. And again, all that's left for me to then do is just convert that into minutes by dividing by 60. So again, a number of ways in which you can do this particular question. For 24b, it says, in fact, on Tuesday, Lars swims at a slower constant speed than on Monday. What does this mean about the number of minutes he swims on Tuesday? Well, if he is swimming at a slower rate, it means then that the answer then is the number, how long it's going to take is going to be a lot bigger. So the one that we need to tick is going to be our third option. Moving on to question 25, it says 4 people are taking part in a TV talent show. Here are Amy's marks from 6 judges. The pie chart shows the telephone vote, and it says that Amy's total score is found by multiplying the mean number of marks by 4 and then adding her percentage to the telephone vote. So first things first, what we need to do is we need to work out the average of these numbers. So the mean, let's use a different colour. So the mean is equal to adding the sum, so 8 plus 9 plus 9 plus 6 plus 9 plus 10, divided by 6, and that gives me a mean mark of 8.5. So it's 51 over 6, which is 8.5. Then we need to work out the percentage of the telephone vote. So the phone vote percentage, or to work out the percentage, it's going to be the angle of Amy divided by the total number of angles, which is 360, multiplied by 100, which gives us an answer of 45%. So all that's left for us to do is to use these two numbers to work out what Amy's total score is. So here it's going to be, so the total score is going to equal 4 times 8.5 plus the 45%. So if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 79. Moving on to question 26, it says that a house price on a street increases by 5.1% each year. Show after 14 years the price that the house price on the street at least doubles. So for this, there's a couple of ways in which we can do this. Now, this is a compound interest question. So to increase by 5.1%, that's going to be 100% plus 5.1%, which is 105.1%. And that as a decimal is 1.0151. Now, if I type that into my calculator and raise that to the power of 14, I get an answer of 2.006 blah blah blah, which, as this number is over 2, that means then it's at least doubled. Now another alternative you could do is to pick a price for a house. So let's say that the original value, let's just say, is 100,000. If I then multiplied that by 1.051 to the power of 14 and type that into my calculator, so 100,000 multiplied by 1.051 to the power of 14, it gives me an answer of £649.47, and as you can see, that's more than doubled, and that would be absolutely fine for an explanation. And moving on to our last question, it says that Town A has a population of 84,000 and an area of 7 square miles. Town B has a population density of 4,695 people per square kilometre. And what this question is asking us to do is to see which town has the greater population density. Now for Town B, we already know this because it is told us in this question. Now the important part of this question is looking at the units. Now here for town A we're given the area in square miles, but in the town B we're given the area in square kilometres. So the first thing I need to do is convert the square miles using this unit conversion to get it into square kilometres. So if I do 7 times 2.6, I get an answer of 18.2 square kilometres. So then from this I can then work out what town A pop density is going to be, in which I use this formula here. So the population is 84,000 divided by 18.2, and that gives me an answer of 4615. So that's for town A. So comparing this number here with this number here, which number is bigger? Well, town B, and there is my working out for that. And that concludes the end of this paper.